Story 1. My son is terrified of the day stalker. Newton, Georgia is a small town near the Alabama border, less than an hour away from Stanwyck. My husband Robert's hometown. Newton's your typical one. Walmart, one high school town. People are friendly, and every November the weather starts getting a little cooler. But there's also quite a bit of history in Newton as well. Some of it ugly, some interesting. But recently, we've started getting some new history in this small town. A dark notoriety, you see. Newton was a quiet all-American town, well before it became home to the day stalker. The police and press don't know anything about the killer. For all we know, the stalker could have been male, female, whatever. It didn't matter. There were no clues, just a bizarre MO, a victim that always went missing in the daytime. All of the victims were suspected to have been taken during the day, morning, afternoon, evening. It didn't matter to the stalker. And then, like clockwork, the bodies were found a little less than 24 hours later, always in a remote location, always in the daytime. RNS out, the stalker was a pure sunrise sundown serial killer. The murders had been piling up for about a year now, a year of panic and turmoil. And yes, the media went fucking nuts. We had national and local affiliates patrolling the town like a swarm of buzzards, all of them rude as fuck. I dealt with the chaos for a while. After all, I was one of the local beat writers for the Rockdale Citizen, our bi-weekly paper. Well, I should say I was a writer for them. The intrusive invasion of all these other pretentious reporters killed my action. All anyone ever wrote about was the day stalker, and these national writers all had a hell of a lot more resources than I did. More ways to bullshit the lack of information, at least. And since I didn't cover sports or local history, I was among the first of the Rockdale casualties. So I was laid off a few weeks ago. I guess Rockdale figured they'd let the big bows cover the day stalker. I was expendable. Well, whatever. Fuck them. I didn't need that shit paper. I had a degree. Robert made good money on the police force. Me and him would still live in the heart of Newton suburbia. Only now I'd the more time to write. Yeah, that's right. Local Newton. Reporter Michelle Lenz was now gonna become a world-famous novelist. Or at least I was gonna make my umpteenth attempt at it. Most importantly, I now had more time with my son Billy. Billy was 8 and scared shitless by the stalker coverage. I couldn't blame him, considering the fear that swept over the community like a thick fog, and like in a thick fog, we couldn't see who the killer was. We didn't know who'd be next. And even in the daytime, we had no idea when the stalker would strike again. Regardless of all the press, us Newtonites felt totally isolated, nothing more than helpless pawns for this exploitative news story. During the long layoff, I spent more time with Billy. I think having me around comforted him. Gone were those long work nights, spent at the office or covering local elections. Shit, I could even pick Billy up from school on time without having him wait around over an hour, like an embarrassed orphan. Now Billy and I were closer than ever. While Robert was stressed and overworked with the other officers, I became like both a mother and father for Billy. Both the new, maturing mama and devoted daddy. We'd even play catch together in those cool autumn evenings. From what I saw, my constant Unemployment gave Billy constant reassurance, constant safety from the plague of annies brought upon us by both the stalker and the stifling media. Everything in Newton was so tumultuous nowadays. A feeding frenzy of news cameras and asshole anchors. They made it tough to do anything in our little town. Traffic got congested, crowds conquered the city. And, of course, putting Billy to sleep was harder than ever. With Robert gone most nights, I was always there at Billy's bedside. A lot of nights I even fell asleep lying right next to him, a Scooby-Doo book usually on my chest. And tonight was no different. There we were lying on his bed, in Billy's bomb shelter of a bedroom. There were the shelves of action figures, the Scooby-Doo dolls, and the countless comic books. Billy was interested in the scary stuff, just not old enough to handle the real disturbing stuff. In his room, Billy cowered beneath his Superman blankets like a terrified soldier hiding in the trenches. I could sense his unease, his trembling timidity, Billy's nerves yet. Another victim of the day stalker, but I was there by his side. I held Billy close, my arm draped around him like a shield. All while reading him the latest adventures of Scooby-Doo. Oh, the illustrated monsters provided us a safe spookiness from the all-too-real horror conquering our small town. As I finished the last page, I looked over and saw Billy's eyes glued to the window, perpetual worrying on his young face. I squeezed his shoulder. "Hey," I said in a soft tone. Startled, Billy looked at me with quivering eyes. "It's okay, Billy," I comforted him. "But what if he's out there?" Billy asked in a low voice. His nervous gaze drifted back to the window. To our backyard, the lighting outside illuminated the small yard. A perfect lawn I'd kept pristine due to all my free time. Even the shed-out back looked nice, the opposite of the dilapidated eyesores that most of our neighbors had allowed theirs to turn into. I closed the book and laid it on the knitstand. I could see it was gonna take more than Scooby-Doo to ease my baby's fears. "He's not, Billy," I told him, ever the caring mother. I leaned in close. "I promise." Billy faced me. He could see the confidence radiate off my warm smile. "He won't get you at night," I said to him. I rubbed Billy's shoulder. "The day stalker only comes out in the daytime, remember." "Yeah," Billy said, his voice still full of trepidation. I kissed his forehead like a lifetime mom's kiss. Only mine was sincere. "You're safe at night, sweetie." "I promise you." "You are." Silent, Billy just looked at me with his big bright eyes. "Ain't no one gonna get you," I continued. I pinched Billy's cheek. "Not as long as I'm here." "But what about the daytime?" Billy asked in a tremble. "What about it?" Like a paranoia Scot, Billy stole another glance out the window. "What if he gets me in the daytime?" Grinning, I pulled him in closer. "Sweetie, you'll be in school." I followed his gaze out the window, out at our lovely lawn. "And when you're not, I'm with you." "Okay. Mommy's gonna be here a lot now. I'm gonna take you to school and take you back home." My playful hands threatened to tickle Billy. He couldn't help but laugh as he leaned in toward me. The chuckling alleviated Billy's scared state, music to my desperate ears. "Mommy's never leaving you, baby," I reassured him. "I'm always with you. Remember that." "I know." His lingering smile relieved me. Even a weak smile was better than seeing your 8-year-old son so dominated by Annie's, and Daddy'll protect us, too. You know he's tough, like you." With the confidence of Wonder Woman, I strengthened my hold on Billy, showing off my physical and emotional strength. "You got that right before I could give him another kiss." Billy's small hand blocked me. "But, Mom," "Yes, what about Jody?" he said, his voice a mere whimper, like he was asking a question he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. Like he didn't want the answer. "Jody?" I asked, keeping my smile. "That girl from school?" "Yeah." He peeked out the window. "I'm worried about her." He faced me. "Is she gonna be safe, too?" Supportive, I cradled Billy in my arms. Yes, and this time I did tickle him. "I promise you Jody'll be fine." Billy giggled like a grade school maniac. So much so he almost fell off the bed, grinning. I held him steady in my arms. "Jody's safe. Okay, both of y'all are." Still laughing, Billy wrapped an arm around my neck. "Okay." Like a victorious mama, I planted a kiss on Billy's soft cheek. Full of joy, we looked on at each other's smiling faces. My job here was done in this arena of toys and superheroes, but deep down I knew I'd lie. One of the few lies I'd ever tell my son. Less than 30 minutes later, Billy was sound asleep. He slept heavy, too. I could go berserk in that room, but he'd never wake up. The cartoons I'd left on his flat screen were more effective than a sleeping pill. Billy didn't even budge when I stepped off the bed. I'd left him some juice and cookies on the nights, tanned, a little something extra in the grape juice just in case Billy were to wake up in those next few hours. I turned off the lights in the backyard, like I always did for these late-night rituals. Dressed in my hoodie and jeans, I walked alone toward the shed. The November coldness did nothing against the warm excitement I felt within. You see, I hadn't told Billy a complete lie. He was safe, and he would always be safe, unfortunately. I just had to lie about Jody. When she skipped school today, the opportunity was the perfect to pass up. Like when the naive fly just happens to land on that vicious trap. The little girl should have known better. After all, Newton isn't the town for skipping class. Not when the day stalker lurks about in those mornings and afternoons. I stepped inside my shed, trembling with never-ending excitement. My hand managed to lock the door behind me. The hanging small light bulb broadcast little Jody marks lying on a table in the back. She was out cold, naked, bound and gagged in duct tape with tight precision, like a patient awaiting surgery. Only there was gonna be no drugs to ease the pain. I'd awaken her soon enough. I always woke them up before I got started. Behind her waited all my tools, items on the pegboard and shelves. Knives, spades, hammers, all sorts of vicious weapons. All at my disposal, my exhilaration warming me from the shed's coldness. I walked up to the arsenal of weapons. My eager eyes scanned each and every one of them. My touch caressed them. There were so many choices. Throughout my pre-G ritual, I realized no one in the media would ever know that forcing me out of Rockdale had only increased my reign of terror. Back when I was working, I had a tough time with the schedule. Balan, C-I-N-G, being a mother, wife, reporter, and killer was tough. But now, well, I had all the free time in the world. While Billy was in school, I had all day to do what I wanted to do, to indulge in my sick pleasures and Tomorrow, after dropping Billy off, the police would discover what was left of Jody's body. Like a musician releasing a surprise album, I'd dump her corpse somewhere to continue the circus, my world tour of slaughter, and everyone would still fear me. They'd still be terrified of the day stalker. And through it all, Billy would always be safe. That much was true. Our relationship would never suffer. I may hurt others, but I'd never dare hurt him. I love Billy. While he may forever live in fear of the stalker, he'll forever love me. Finally, I settled on my sharpest garden spade. In the blade's reflection, all I saw was my wide smile, my day stalker face, like a demented child at Christmas. Only I was gonna have much more fun holding the weapon. I looked over at Jody. In just a few moments, I'd wake her. Then her helpless eyes would watch me make that first vicious wound, her screams suppressed, her body wrapped. Sure, I was the day stalker. I collected my victims during those long afternoons, and I'd dispose of their bodies early in the morning. But the real work, the real fun part always happened at night. Story 2. Candle Walker. The room was dark and empty, a spare room that I hadn't had the chance to do anything with. The electricity had gone out some time earlier that night, so I had no way to tell time and no source of light except for the flashlight in my hand, my lighter, and the candle I had brought just in case. I was sitting with my back in the far corner of the room. Ashlight pointed straight at the door on the other side of the room. The beam of light danced on the wall across from me as my hands shook. Terrified, although I had no idea what had been stalking me that day. It started as I was coming back to the old house from the store. I didn't have a care, so I biked, carrying my groceries into plastic bags and a crate hooked up to the rear of my bike. When I got home, I noticed that I was missing a bag of groceries. It must have fallen off when I was riding home. Thinking it nothing more than unfortunate luck, I picked up the one bag and headed inside. After all, I could do without canned goods for a few days. I opened the door and almost immediately tripped on something piled in a heap at the foot of my door just inside the house. The groceries from the bag I was holding flew into the air and scattered as they hit the ground. When I looked back to see what had tripped me, there was a sloppy pile of canned food. Since I never locked my door, I simply dismissed it as a good Samaritan act from someone who lived in the area and was too shy to introduce themselves. I picked up all the food and stowed it away in the kitchen. It was getting to be about night time, so I headed upstairs to my bedroom, got a good book, flipped the switch on the bedside lamp, and entrenched myself in a good story. As the night went on, I started to hear weird noises coming from downstairs in the kitchen. I told myself it was just my imagination, because every time I would notice the sounds they would stop, and when I went back to the story they would pick up again. My imagination would do that to me from time to time. Before I was able to finish my chapter, the lamplight flickered out. I put my book down, still open and pages down to save my spot, and went to turn on the main light. Unfortunately, it didn't come on either. The power was out. As I tried to remember where the circuit breaker was, the noises from downstairs resumed. It sounded like someone rummaging around in my kitchen. I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand drawer, a bat from underneath my bed, and headed downstairs. each of the steps creaking on my way down. When I got to the kitchen, the noises stopped. Bat ready, I pointed my flashlight all around to see where the intruder was, but saw no one. What I did see was the canned food I had recently put away was stacked neatly in a pyramid fashion just beneath the kitchen table. I swallowed hard, thinking that someone was either playing some prank or some sick, twisted game. Slowly I crept towards the table, feet wet from orange juice and milk that had been spilled on the floor. When I got close to the table, I could hear breathing coming from beneath. I stooped down to look, but saw nothing. Slowly I reached out to touch the pyramid of cans. As soon as my hand made contact, the cans scattered. It was as if something burst through them, scattering them in all directions. I fell back onto the soaked floor and dropped the flashlight. As I frantically grasped for the light, I heard the sound of feet splashing through the puddles on the floor and run out of my kitchen. I got up and slowly followed the footprints made of the juice and milk mixture. What struck me as odd was that they weren't human footprints. They were the same width and length, but the toes were much longer, almost as long as fingers. I followed them towards the front door where they disappeared. I relaxed a little, just thankful that whatever it was gone. But I didn't lose my grip on the bat. Slowly I walked backwards towards the stairs again, planning on locking myself up in my room and waiting till morning. As I did, it sounded like something wet hit the wooden floor in front of me. I pointed my flashlight down at the floor and my heart stopped. There was a new footprint. This one pointed at me. I took another step back. Another wet slap. Another footprint. I turned and ran, tripping up the stairs, but making it up to my room. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and pushed the bed up against it, knocking my book down in the process. I set the bat down on the bed for a second and grabbed a lighter and candle out of my nightstand just in case I would need it. That's when I heard the first squeak, whatever it was. It was mounting the first step in the staircase. Frantically, I ran to the opposite side of the room, where there was a door that led to a spare room. Upon hearing the second step creak, I threw open the door, which didn't have a lock, ran inside, and headed to the far corner. I sat there quietly, breathing heavily, heart pounding in my ears. I realized that I left my bat on bed, but was convinced by the creaking of the third and fourth step that it wasn't worth going out to get it. And I sat there, counting the steps as they creaked. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was getting closer. My hands shook as a tear ran down my cheek. What was going on? 15, 16, 17. I tried to control my breathing. After all, I was trying not to be found. 19, 20, 20-1. My heart pounded louder. Sweat flattened my hair to my head, and the shaking became worse. 22, 23, 24. My knuckles were white as I clenched. The flashlight, whose beam was now dancing all over the wall and rarely landing on the door. 25. It had reached the second floor. Slowly the footsteps got closer as it approached my room. I heard the lock turn, the door creak open, and the bed scrape across the floor. I heard the bat rattle against the wood as it fell off the bed, and still the footsteps continued. Pages turned as Everett was picked up my book and looked through it. Then came a thud as it dropped it. It began to rummage through my drawers and my sheets as if looking for something. Then Everything went as still and quiet. The silence was only broken by my quiet sobs and heavy breathing and the pounding of my heart. It stayed like this for what seemed like a few minutes, and the footsteps continued, closing the distance between it and the spare room. The door slowly creaked open, lingering ajar momentarily. My heart was ready to leap out of my chest. My mouth was dry, and sweat stuck my loathes to my skin. This was it, I thought. As I waited for something to come into the room, nothing happened. Again came the excruciating silence, this time lasting for what felt like hours, and hours on end. Nothing happened, and I was starting to believe that whatever it was had lost interest and left. Still I sat in my corner, flashlight trained on the door opposite of me, slowly returning to a calmer state of mind. After God knows how long, my flashlight flickered out, leaving me in complete darkness. Frantically, I reached for the lighter and flicked it on. My gaze shot towards the door. Still nothing. I looked around the room. Nothing. Slowly I got up and crossed the room to the door. I closed it and sat with my back against it, just in case. Still the silence reigned. Finally, I let out a sigh of relief. It was gone. I went to flip the light switch, but still the power was out. So I lit the candle instead, and that's when I became aware of something standing in the opposite corner of the room. My heart froze in my chest, and my lungs refused to work. It hadn't been there before, but it was now, in a frenzy to get up and run. I had knocked the candle over, and it went out. I gripped the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was stuck, locked inside with God knows what. I searched the floor for the lighter and flicked it on. I looked around, but the being was gone. Again, I was alone. Breathing heavily, I found the candle, all the while keeping my gaze on the far corner where it had been just moments before. Once I brought the lighter to the wick and life was breathed into the candle. It reappeared in the far corner, exactly as it had before. The candle gave it away. The first thing I noticed were its feet, flat, long, and bony. Its body was built the same way, abnormally skinny like a Holocaust victim, just skin wrapped in bone. It was short, too. Like a child, it only came up to my waist, if that. Its knobbly arms were just long enough that its long, skinny fingers reached the ground as it stood straight up. It wore the remains of a tattered old gray cloak draped over its shoulders. Its face was something that is beyond words to describe. As best I can, it was bald, pale, and had no ears or nose that I could see. The mouth was thin and lacked proportion, much like the rest of its body, and the eyes were round and lifeless, black orbs that simply reflected the candlelight. As I stared at it, its eyes seemed to calm me down. My heart rate slowed, my breathing steadied, and the urge to run faded away. Something about its eyes kept me gazing into them, unable to move, not wanting to if I could. I began to realize that it had followed me for quite some time, not just since the grocery store, but it had been there when I was a child, watching me, waiting for me. It had followed me since then, and it had a purpose for me. I could feel its gaze drawing me in, helping me realize that I belonged with it. It stepped forward, slowly putting one foot in front of another, dragging its fingers across the ground. It came right up next to me, its gaze never leaving mine. As I stared down at it and it up at me, it slowly raised one arm, holding out its long, thin hand. Its fingers were about twice my size, and I knew that normally this would be something to be afraid of. But as I gazed into the light reflected off its eyes, I began to forget my name, my past, and myself. I took its hand, and it patted my hand with its other hand. It took the candle and led me out the door, down the stairs, and out into the yard. Together we walked down the street and up to the forest, the candle lighting our path. I stopped at the edge of the woods and looked back at the city. The creature tugged on my arm, insisting that I follow. I looked into its eyes, and all the worries were gone. Somehow I knew I had to hurry, because the others were waiting. I was not first one he had found, nor would I be the last. I was going to join the others. I kept on walking, following the path that it led me down, lit by a mixture of candle and moonlight. As we strode, the wind picked up, and the candle was blown out. It dropped to the forest floor with a thud. I looked around frantically for my guy, but it had disappeared. Still, there was the grip on my hand, pulling me down, the path lit by the moonlight. I would never be seen again. Story 3. Primal. The paranormal world is composed entirely of the nightmarish delusions of terrified and insecure humans around the world, enriched by centuries of cowards and uneducated bumpkins. People who would rather take stock in the undefined hullabaloo of beings, the metaphysical, the demons of their own minds, as opposed to the rationality and cold, hard truth of science and contemporary knowledge. None of that actually exists. There is nothing that we can not explain or understand. The primal human mind can be a powerful and terrifying entity. I can say with utmost certainty that I am the most down-to-earth person you could possibly encounter, but after what I have seen and felt with my own eyes and body, I'm writing this more for my own sanity than anything else. Perhaps there may be some kind of twisted solace for me in these odds, but if there is indeed an underlying purpose for this document, some moral that may be conveyed to the rest of the world, it is to confirm that there are truly some things in this world that we humans, the supposed epitome of rational thought, have not yet understood, nor would we ever want to understand. Reader, let me ask you now, what really terrifies you when you read a scary story? Is it really the words on this screen that scare you? The integration of several choice spook sentences into an otherwise rather bland and cliché narrative about a boy alone in the woods with a tall, faceless monster waiting to jump out from behind a tree? Or is it something more, something intensely psychological, beyond the words that make you nervously check over your shoulder, peering through the darkness at the ajar closet door, when your perception of the physical world begins to turn on you? Something malevolent steals control of the synapses and signals firing off in the recesses of your brain, toying with your emotions. You are helpless. Primal hypersensitivity and rapid breathing take over, and sitting in the suddenly abnormally still, silent, cold darkness of your bedroom, you realize that you really are not as safe as you believe yourself to be. This is the insidious, cold realization percolating down your neck and tendrils, a pure frozen nerve sensation that you may be in very real danger. Sitting alone in the silent darkness of your once familiar room, the pale artificial light of a computer screen reflecting on your face, and God, no. What else? Maybe that is what this is to you. Simply another scary story, isn't it? You could not be more mistaken. I could not be more serious. I am a boy of 19, a Tina, care in all the various connotations of the word, a university, engineering student with a penchant for alcohol, intelligent debate, and women. Several days ago, I was at a house party with a buddy of mine, and as usual, we got to drinking and fraternizing with much mirth, being the self-proclaimed intellectual I am at heart. However, I eventually found my way into a small group of individuals who were heavy, ng a debate about ghosts, entities, demons, and the general subject of the paranormal and otherworldly in a rather inconspicuous corner of the room. In retrospect, it is possible that these fell hows were even more drunk than I, because there is no other way that such a subject would arise so naturally in normal conversation in such an environment, and be spoken about with such excited and feverish fervor. There is also no other way that we could have so carelessly set off the events that shook me to my core and destroyed the rational world I had clung to for so long. As I mentioned before, I had been raised to take no stock in anything that I could not see, touch, feel, or otherwise explain through rational thought and observation. As such, my automatic alcohol-fueled reaction to the conversation of this group of paranormal worshippers was to completely put down and argue against their stupidly misguided bullshit stories and beliefs. And since I wasn't the only one drunk and preaching my beliefs in that group, I got a lot of retaliation and threats. Nothing truly malicious, though, until one guy stepped up to my face, alcohol permeating every word, and amidst the din of the party challenged me to step into the unlit restroom, stare myself in the eye of the sink mirror's reflection, and summon Satan in my own place. These are the words he said to me. Now, you may think that there's some kind of chant or mantra that you're supposed to utter to make something like this happen. It brings to mind the classic party gags of Bloody Mary or the butcher in the bathtub or whatever, but this was not it. What I was told to do was to look into a mirror and simply concentrate on the intention to summon something from the oath, aside in my own place, whatever that meant. I knew not then. I am sorry to say that I know now. I of course agreed with much cheering and cheering, if only to prove a point. I was ushered into the designated bathroom, and the door was quickly shut behind me. Instantly my world shrank into a claustrophobic and pungent box of muffled, amped radio pop, regurgitated Svedka, and the sounds of sex-crazed teenagers. My brain shocked my body into an instant of panic as my physical world changed so suddenly. But after that instant I was calm. My eyes adjusted quickly. I perceived a toilet that would no doubt be filthy if illuminated, but in this combination of blurred atmosphere and alcohol, it appeared to me merely as a blob of gurgling yellow porcelain. The wallpaper tealed in a pool of sickly light from a dirt-stained window. The sink was directly opposite me. I stepped up to it, leaning my weight on my hands as they grasped the wet metal of the sink's handles, and stared into my own reflected eyes. With a sigh, my thoughts wandered as my physical eyes locked with identical metaphysical ones in the mirror. It was too dark to see any real emotion or intent in them, but I stared into those shadow eyes anyway. At this time I felt no fear at all. I, of course, do not recall exactly how long this continued for. Nobody ever would be able to in a situation like this. It seems to me that, in moments of high adrenaline and rush, sense of time becomes distorted, and in retrospect, only the jarring moments of euphoria or horror of an experience are vividly recalled without any reference to any sort of chronological flow of events. Not to mention that I was very drunk and very sleepy. Probably shouldn't have downed that 8th shot of Grey Goose so greedily. That is why I do not recall exactly when I felt it, or exactly when I saw it. I only recall the sensation of panic and shock I felt when it happened. Reader, do you know what true fear is? Do you really know it? At that moment I did. My reflection, face covered in shadow except for my lips and nostrils, was still my own. But it was not me, it was my 19-year-old frame, but not dressed in the flannel, jeans, and drink-stained frat shoes that I remember seeing in the mirror seemingly moments before. It was my naked body, completely naked, every inch and section so familiar to me, down to the small pockets of fat and muscle. But its face was something that only the darkest, most twisted mind could possibly comprehend and leave. And then, not to entirety, it was an image of me that was deeply violating, deeply disturbing, primal and terrifying. Its lips had been curled back into a leer that penetrated my core with a nerve dead cold, and its eyes, cold and dead as they were, in that lightless place bore into my own with an illuminated, deathly, supernatural intelligence far beyond my own mortal one. It knew me so well. The depth of its knowledge seemed to transcend anything I was capable of understanding. I felt absolutely powerless. It was not me, oh God, but it was me, and it wanted me so badly. It wanted to possess me, to murder me, and take my place. The sight of its pale, familiar form and those godforsaken eyes scared me, yes. But what actually instilled pure terror in me was the knowledge that this thing was, indeed, me, a perfectly flawed, primal version of myself. It is this that stood before me, long before its time, long before it should have had its brief instant in our world, but still in the mirror, and the sensation that rocked my body in undulating waves of panic and despair, standing alone in that dark bathroom. That is what I call true fear. My brain wanted to throw my body back, away from this thing in the mirror, but I instead involuntarily pitched forward sharply and vomited explosively into the sink. I saw my naked body in the mirror mimic my motion, but instead it simply dry retched. No alcohol left its lips because it had no physical body to put the stuff into. It was only then that my knees gave and my body slumped to the ground. I had one last fleeting view of the thing as it also buckled, falling in a sickly slumped motion to the ground, its dead eyes locked onto mine, before my chin connected with the hard marble of the basin edge and I hit the dirty ground of the bathroom. I lost consciousness instantly, the terror of the moment still sharp. It was such a horrible feeling. I woke up with my body peering down at me, a sea of faces reflecting expressions ranging from amusement to mild concern. The music had been turned off. The group that had issued me the challenge in the first place was regarding him. From some distance, I began to sob. It was too much for me. I believe after that the paramedics were called and the party disbanded as the house was bathed in the flashing of emergency vehicle lights and the car headlights of concerned neighbors. It has been a week since that night. I am no longer afraid, but I am still very shaken. I have thought deeply about the experience, and it is from these ruminations that I have come to the conclusions and theories of what I saw in that mirror on that night. But then again, there are many other factors and forces at place. Here that I doubt I can possibly understand. In my still weakened state of mind, I still use my bathroom normally, and I do not fear my reflection. I am far too rationally minded and sober to be so silly. The human being is really a self-centered specimen beneath the guise of society's standards, virtues, and commandments we dictate ourselves to strive for. There will always be a moment here a truly ugly version of ourselves comes out, a primal, evil being that we are terrified to acknowledge. It is a presence of its own, something we desperately bury deep within ourselves for the entirety of our brief existences, and scream to stay away from us to our dying breath, when it finally can claim us for just a moment in our death throes before our conscience depart, and the body becomes a home to nothing at all. We live our lives trying to be good human beings, to accomplish wealth in both familial relationships and financial security. We just try to be the opposite of bad. I've come to believe that, in a sense, it becomes our pursuit in life to deny this creature possession of our body until the moment we die, when we simply cannot deny it anymore. The paranormal world is composed entirely of the nightmarish delusions of terrified and insecure humans around the world, enriched by centuries of cowards and uneducated bumpkins, people who would rather take stock in the undefined hullabaloo of beings, the metaphysical, the demons of their own minds, as opposed to the rationality and cold, hard truth of science and contemporary knowledge. None of that actually exists. There is nothing that we cannot explain or understand. For 19 years, this has been my attitude towards the paranormal. I do not hasty in these words any longer. Story 4. They came with the tie. The gentle breeze pushed through the screen and tickled my short black hair against my forehead. All the windows were open, but I knew I would have to close them soon. It seemed like a downpour would start momentarily. The waves pushed and crashed against the boats and docked just outside. I began to go around closing the windows, not sure if there were any procedures I had to follow. If it rained, I had only been working here at the marina for 3 days. My radio beeped and shook me from my trance state. "Sean, you there?" I knew the rough voice anywhere. "Yeah, Ron? What's up?" Ron had never failed to surprise me. I knew just by his complexion when I saw him he was a veteran. But still the stories he told rattled me to the core. "I'm coming in. It's about to rain," he grumbled in the usual gravelly voice. I chuckled to myself. It reminded me of Batman. All right, doors unlocked. I set the radio down and peered out the glass door leading onto the docks. There, I saw Ron slowly limping because of his bad knee. He had told me about the injury and said it was from a grenade, but refused to go into detail. I made him and myself a cup of coffee as the rain began to come down. We both sat and I continued to look out the window, waiting for the work day to come to an end. Lately, storms had plagued at this side of the bay, causing the tide to rise and bring floods. Looks like the marina is going under again. Ron said, breaking the silence as he glanced at the rising water. Hopefully, not too much this time. I took a sip of the coffee. Last time it was up to our knees, your knees, he corrected me and chuckled his raspy laugh. He had always enjoyed Maki. NG fun of my under-average height, hey? At least my eyes aren't as gray as my hair. I grinned, and we both snickered. The Titan slowly rose as the day went on. Ron had decided he would cut his workday short, hence it was far too flooded to work on the boats. I stayed, hoping at least one customer would show up since we also sold beer and cigarettes. For a long while I stared out the window before I noticed Summit. Hanging on the other side of the boatyard, past the bobbing ships, I saw a man. He was kneeling beside a dead bird. I gagged, thinking of bad it must smell, and why this man was even any it. Slowly, he reached down and picked it up by the legs. Blood trickled down its neck and dripped to the ground. I stood and walked over to the window, staring at him, disgusted, but very curious. Suddenly he snapped his head towards me, causing my legs to go limp and nearly fall backwards. When I saw him, what I believed to be his face had no features. Any exposed skin seemed completely out of focus. His clothes, however, were clearly visible. The polo he wore was stained a sickly green color. The longer I looked at him, the more nauseous I felt. I forced myself to look away from the misty complexion. Slowly rubbing my eyes, I looked back up through the window. Streams of rain snaked down the glass. The man and bird were gone. Not a trace that I could see was left. An open field stood all around the area they had been. The only place he could have gone was the water, which seemed to have risen an unusual amount. I instantly called Ron in. A panic, he answered, clearly annoyed by my phone call. On his break, "What do you want?" he grumbled. "I have no idea," I blurted without thinking. "This guy picked up a dead bird and just ran away with it. Why is this problem, Chon?" There was a pause as I thought about it. Somehow, I knew it wasn't natural and not just my mind playing tricks on me, but I sure didn't want him thinking I was mentally insane. There's no problem, just some weirdo, he reassured me in a calmer tone. We both hung up, and I went back to my duties, sitting in a chair and hoping I wouldn't see that scene again. The hours passed and the rain continued to fall. There was no sign of anyone or anything, so I decided to close up for the day. I grabbed my things and made my way down the aisles, setting the alarm and stepping outside. The rain pounded my head as the key slipped around in my hand. Finally making it to the door, locking it, I began walking to my car, all red. Why soaking and in no rush. As I walked, I began to slowly notice figures, all standing perfectly still with their backs to me. The same pounding feeling in my head returned, matching the rapid beats of my heart. Taking slight glances around me, I counted 5 of them. Somehow, they hadn't caught my attention moments ago. I failed to see them. When I was locking the door, they all stood next to the ever-rising tide, their ankles half submerged in the water. The clothes they wore didn't seem to be drenched like mine were. Everything about the situation unfolding bothered me. Before I knew it, I was in a full sprint across the parking lot. Water splashed my legs as I ran and clicked the button on my keychain, unlocking the doors to my car. Before I could grip the handle, I pushed myself into the front seat, bashing my head against the door, causing the pounding feelings in my head to seem like grenades exploding. Horror fell into the pit of my stomach, and as the tide rose, the why advanced growing closer and extinguishing the feeling of safety my car provided. My breathing became strained and tears began to sting my eyes. The ignition refused my many attempts to start the car and escape whatever horrors were approaching. Opening the door, I stepped back out into the rain. I made a quick dash back to the store. Fumbling for my keys, I jammed them into the lock and swung the door open. Not thinking about the alarm, I slammed the door and hurried behind the counter. I heard the light beeps as the system prepared to scream for help. Being too scared to move, I simply sat and waited. A piercingly loud alarm was raised within a mere few seconds. Something accompanied it, though, something I couldn't explain. Tearing out the window, I saw one of the figure's hands on the sides of its head and mouth wide open. An unhuman shriek came out from between the black, glossy, jagged teeth scattered around in its mouth. I ducked back behind the counter, a legion of screaming creatures surrounding me, and the tide continuing to rise. After what seemed like forever, they finally stopped. Slowly, I peeked out the window once again and saw the tide rippling from raindrops, now even higher, but without the creature. The bright headlights approached the store and a truck came skidding to stop. None other than Ron jumped out, shotgun in hand. "What did you do this time?" I heard him yell from outside. I pressed my fingers to my lips and hissed, "Get in here. I don't know what's going on, but if I came down here for nothing, I could hear the air being forced from his lungs as his body lurched forward, the same out-of-focus creature from earlier standing behind him. Ron stumbled a few feet before regaining his balance and swinging around, his skin clearly becoming pale as he glared at the creature. Its hand flinched as if it were about to grab Ron. Without hesitation, he fired. Pellets speckled the green polo, but the crater, he didn't so much as move. The surface of its skin rippled and shimmered like water after being struck with a stone. "Run!" I screamed at him, but before the word could leave my mouth, he was already in a sprint toward me, his limp greatly hindering his speed. The shotgun clattered against the pavement, and the creature began its pursuit. They got so close to the store I could hear the strained gasps as Ron tried to flee inside. Again, the creature lunged at him. This time they both crashed to ground and came skidding to a stop inches in front of me. I grabbed his wrist and yanked him halfway through the door frame before a strong resistance came from his other side. The look of suppressed agony was painted on his face. The creature had grabbed him by his injured leg. A firm tug jostled one of his wrists free from my grasp. For the first time I could see Ron with a look of true terror in his eyes. "Please don't let go." The tone of his voice shook me deeper than any of his stories ever could. There was a light pop as his leg gave way, and the agony plastered on his face echoed through the marina. I tripped and fell forward, scraping my hands as I caught myself. Ron was being dragged away. When I looked up, his knee twisted at an unnatural angle. He shrieked, clawing the pavement, trying to slow his descent into the water. I forced myself up off the ground and darted after him. My feet splashed through the water as I chased the duo. Ron was being dragged through the water like a heavy sack, his legs suspended in air by the creature. A light trail of red swirled in the water as the skin on his back was torn apart by the cement. The adrenaline began to wear off, and I became more aware of my surroundings. Water splashed against my chest, and I realized, Saint, how deep I had gone into the water. Panic leaked through my body as my mind took me back 10 years. I could almost remember the exact feeling as water filled my lungs, the sun back me darker and more distant as my exhausted 12-year body sank to the bottom of the pool. A chill ran down my spine, and I forced the memory out of my mind. Ron no longer flailed about in the water. His body seemed limp, and his arms floated behind him. Tearing my eyes from the scene, I turned back and got out of the water as quickly as I could, retreating back into the store. The alarm had back. On a simple background noise, I focused more on the threats that caused it to sound in the first place. Knowing they would converge on the store, I found a place to hide. Two small cabinets in the furthest corner from the water seemed like my best option. I climbed in and waited seconds. Minutes, hours passed by as I sat there. The rain had slowly stopped, and by what I could tell from the small crack in door, nobody had come inside. My heart pounded like a drum line as I pushed my way out of the hiding spot. The moon sliced through the dissipating clouds and reflected off the now calm water. Slowly, cautiously, I made my way down the seemingly endless aisle to the door. I could already tell the tide had gone down drastically. The parking lot was how I had left it. Ron's truck and my car were parked a short distance from the store, and the shotgun lay untouched in the headlights. Making my way around the store, I saw them, hundreds of the creatures, making a hazy and focused head wall along the tide. One by one they melted back into the water, their cloths going under with them. A slight feeling of relief washed over me as they and the water fell back into its usual sea, though the feeling was quickly overtaken by something stronger, pure dread. Not over the fact that Ron was gone, not that everybody would ever believe a single thing I tell them, but I knew I would see them again. I knew I would see Ron again. There was one thing, no matter how hard I try, I knew I could never change. They came with the tie. Story 5, screeching. It was a lovely fall afternoon, with leaves crisp and fiery, and nary a cloud. In the sky, the sun shone gloriously in the deep cyan ether, giving off the perfect amount of heat, the kind where you can wear shorts comfortably without that unsettling chill on your legs, but you don't find yourself covered in sweat, unless you happen to be one of those who always seems to be sweating. I made my way to my last CLA SS for the afternoon, having received word that my 5 p.m. biology lab had been canceled. I was pretty happy about things. Just one boring economics lecture to go, and I would be home free for a good 24 hours. Yep, I have Wednesdays off. I really love my schedule sometimes. As I made my way through the oppressive mob of students walking every which way, I noticed my best friend and roommate, Tom. I waved to him, but he didn't seem to notice. So, raising my voice above the dull roar, I said, "Hey, Tom." He lifted his head and his eyes darted over to me. We began to make our ways toward each other, and as we did, I noticed something strange about him. Tom wasn't giving off his usual air of dashbaggery. Not today. He's a bad guy, although he does have a certain arrogance to him. Couple that with an appearance that would put scumbag Steve to shame, and you have a snapshot of the guy your mother warned of. He had a heart of gold, though. Earlier that semester, he had snuck a dying kitten into our dorm. I mean, this thing was on the brink of death, and yet, somehow, Tom managed to nurse it back to health. And that's not even the most amazing part. He had 5 exams over the course of the 2 weeks he kept the kitten. He managed to ace all of them, which was quite an uncommon event for Tom, as his free time was spent more on cheap alcohol than expensive textbooks. Yeah, dashabaggery is an unfair word. For Tom, I guess liveliness would be better, as he was full of life. But right now he seemed out of it, in a sort of uneasy haze. He certainly didn't look this way Monday night, when he told me he was going to stay with his girlfriend for a couple of days. I pulled him aside and asked what the matter was. "Meh," he said. "I just haven't been able to sleep much lately, and I haven't been concentrating in class well either." "When have you ever concentrated in class?" I said jokingly. He faintly smiled at me. His look was tinged with a slight degree of pain, suggesting that maybe I had hit a raw nerve. "Actually, it's not just class. It's everything, anything. I can't focus on anything. You think you might be developing a case of ADD or ADHD. More like a case of trimelmtva. Come again? This ringing in my ears won't leave me the fuck alone." "Clearly," I chuckled. "I'm serious. It's this obnoxious high-pitch hum. The kind of thing you would normally dismiss as an effect of listening to music too loud. Only it seems to be coming from something else, like I do. No. It's like there's something in my head. And I mean something in my head." "When did you first notice it? Have you been to a doctor?" "No. And yesterday morning I dismissed it as just me being hungover. If I was talking to anyone else, I'd ask why you were out drinking on a Monday," I said in a last-ditch effort to lighten the mood. But he didn't even give much of a response to that one. Just a look that said, "Are you gonna let me finish?" Tom continued. "Anyway, I felt like shit, so I skipped out on class, and as the day went on I began to feel better. But the ringing, that ringy, it got louder slowly, as if someone, somewhere was turning up the volume. The funny thing is, every time I notice it getting louder, I get a little more uneasy." "Well, I'm heading to class," I interrupted. "I'm heading back to the dorm." "Wrong answer. You said dorm. You need to see a doctor." "I would." His voice trailed off. But I feel lick. I would make no difference. How? Somehow. My fate is sealed. Since Halloween was a few days away, I normally would have attributed this to Tom's rise in dotchiness around this time of year. He always gets into the spirit of the age. Holiday so far, and that his stupid pranks had thus far cost him to relationships and an all-night trip to the hospital when he literally gave old man Johnson a heart attack. Thank God he made a full recall. Point is, he likes to scare people, but what scared me more than his words was the look in his eyes. It was a frightening look that I had never seen from him before. After class, instead of going for dinner, I went straight to the dorm, where I found my roommate lying on the bed, a blanket covering his face. I saw on his desk a prescription for some antibiotic with the bottle on top. It looked like Tom had taken a few, probably more than the recommended dose. Tom tended to that. I felt a little bit of weight lifted off me, some, but not much. Ever since I had seen him earlier that day, I had been worried. What was wrong with Tom? Why did he have that look in his eye? What did he mean by fate is sealed? What is up with all of this? Tom moaned. He groaned. Softly, quietly, suddenly he leapt out of bed and onto the floor, screaming with the whirling hysteria of a madman. His deafening scream lasted almost 30 seconds, and it was a blistering screech the likes of which sounded almost inhuman. I nearly pissed myself in fright, listening to that awful sound. That wretched screech, it was hideous beyond imagining. I shudder even now thinking about it. The worst thing about it, like before, were his eyes. They had rolled back into his head, and the veins and arteries within were beginning to leak. Just when I was about to plunge into insanity myself, he stopped, breathing heavily. Tom looked up at me. All I could do was look back at him in silence. Those eyes, those glowing red eyes, and the screeching. His voice escalated. My God, the screeching. It won't stop. It won't stop. It's so loud. Can you hear it? Can you? You must be able to. You must. It's so loud. Calm down, I shouted. Take your medicine and calm down. For fuck's sake, calm down. Can't you hear it? He repeated. It's blaring. Oh God. Make it stop. Make it stop. His eyes started to roll up again, and in pure fear and rage, I grabbed my backpack, which held several heavy books, and hit Tom on the head hard, then again. Tom mumbled something else about eyes before he passed out. Is everything all right in there? Asked Corey, the Ra. I heard some god-awful noises just a minute ago. Lot of people out here are concerned. I went to the door. I told Corey what I knew and everything that had Saint happened. We both agreed we needed to get him to the psychiatrist's office and fast. So we picked him up and put him in Corey's truck. Once there, we got Tom out of the flatbed. He was asleep, but not sleeping peacefully. He kept mumbling, oh God, or the eyes, or some other unintelligible garble. I was disturbed on so many levels. After almost 3 hours of waiting at the office, Dr. Shannon gave us unsettling news. Not about the terrible screams. Corey and I could hear that oral carnage for ourselves. No, what Dr. Shannon told us was more disturbing. That those moments of screaming madness were all they could get out of Tom when he was awake. They had given him a strong sedative and were prepared to move him into the asylum the next day. In the meantime, he would have to be taken somewhere to rest. I sat at the foot of Tom's bed crying of all the things to come out of nowhere, of all the tragedies that could have happened. Why Tom? Why now? Why like this? Somehow the thought of Tom dying in a car accident or having his throat slashed brought me comfort. At least then he wouldn't have to be tortured like this. Constantly he mumbled about the eyes, always the eyes, red eyes, and the screeching, unnatural screeching, otherworldly screeching that he begged would rob him of his hearing, but never did. At 4:36 that morning, Tom shot up out of bed. Exhaustion had driven me into a light sleep long since, and I was startled by the sudden movement. But I wasn't concerned. He'd sat up like this 4 or 5 times before since I had been watching T. That sedative they had given him was awfully powerful. They said it would keep him down at least until noon. Of course, the dose they had given him to accomplish this feat was near fatal. Hopefully T didn't kill him. As long as he was alive, there was still some chance that they could figure out just what kind of little spider had crawled into Tom's head. Hopefully, his healing cool load start around noon. But it didn't, because at 4:36 Tom began screaming again in a tumultuous rampage. My head, the burning, the eyes, the screeching, my head, my head, my head, my goddamn head. In utter shock and horror, I witnessed the gruesome atrocity unfold before me in slow motion. What took less than 15 seconds slowed to agonizing hours to me. First, his eyes rolled back, and the veins leaked as they had before, the demonic shriek still piercing the black air. Then the veins in his head throbbed, and I heard an even more disturbing sound underneath the horror. And this hell shriek was the sound of something, eating, sloppily munching on some kind of wet morsel. It took me a moment to realize just what that sound was. As the sound began to intensify, Tom's blood-stained whites bulged from his sockets and at last exploded, resulting in an eruption of crimson life. Then came the spiders. I don't know what else to call these things, but spider definitely comes the closest. They were tiny, almost furry creatures with multiple legs. But the worst thing about them was the eyes. Those soul-piercing red eyes that glowed with some disturbing, underworldly aura. Oh God, those hellish eyes. Now I understood what Tom meant about the eyes. But even that wasn't the worst thing about the spiders in the pale glow of the digital clock beside Tom's bed. I could see ... They were gnawing little chunks of something, and suddenly it dawned on me. They were eating Tom's brain. The next thing I knew, I was in my bed, scared, voiceless, and shitless from the ordeal that had seemed so vivid just a second ago. I took a certain comfort in the very possibility that this hellish nightmare might have been a dream, but I was scared to look at the bed across the room for fear of seeing Tom's eyeless corpse. I debated whether or not to do it for a long while. Then, for some insane reason, I decided to check Tom's bed empty. I heaved a sigh of relief. For the time being, I could count this off as the most fucked up dream I had ever had. I even chuckled a little. That chuckle grew into a laugh, and I laughed for a good long while. I couldn't wait to tell Tom when he got back. I laughed and giggled and chuckled some more, and when I was done, I noticed I felt a bit uneasy. I heard, like a sort of hum or ringing in my ears that seemed to come from in my head. Story 6. Annie ran away again the other night. It took me hours to find her in T. Park, going back and forth on the swings without a care in the world, like she had every right to be there. And she dyed her hair again, blonde this time. I didn't want to make a fuss with all Thomas people around, so I caught her on the backswing and dragged her home, kicking and screaming like a lunatic. It was humiliating. I had to smile and shrug at all the people staring like it didn't bother me. As soon as we were home, I sent Annie to her room. She just sat there on the bed, crying and crying. The way she carried on, I didn't have the heart to yell at her for running away. I guess that's the real problem, this lack of discipline. I've never been good at tough but fair. I'm always going to far one way or the other. Like a few months ago, when she came at me with the kitchen knife. For a minute I really thought she was trying to hurt me, my own sweet angel. But afterward she just lay there in my arm, so quiet, letting me stroke her hair and sing her a lullaby. Like nothing had ever happened. But then there was that other time when she started messing around with my doll collection. They're such fragile things, my dolls, and Annie was playing so rough like she wanted to break them. I love those dolls. They remind me of when everything was easier, when I wasn't stuck in this house all day long with Annie's tantrums and Bill's ting. I got upset, and I hit her. I was so ashamed when she ran away. That night I didn't go after her right away. I just stayed there, crying and feeling like the worst mother in the world. I tried to be gentler after that, more understanding, so instead of getting cross with Annie, I let her stay in her room and cooked her some dinner. I turned up the TV real loud so I wouldn't hear the racket he was making in there. She makes such a mess sometimes, and it makes me so angry the way she breaks her things like she doesn't even care about them anymore. I bought her a puppy once, but she wouldn't even touch it, like she was scared of it. The very day I decided to take it back to the pet store, it vanished. I found Annie in the backyard, holding a little trowel sitting on a pile of dirt. I helped her wash up and never mentioned it again. I made her favorite food, macaroni and cheese, hoping it might calm her down. But as soon as I opened the door, she slammed into me, trying to get past. I almost dropped the food everywhere, wrestling with her like that. She had this wild look in her eyes, like an animal. It scared me, being alone in there with her when she was ill. Like that, I put the food on her desk and gently pushed her toward the chair. I made it just the way you like, I told her, smiling and trying not to look as afraid as I felt. She stared at me like she didn't understand a word I was saying. Will you eat some of it? I don't want to, she said. Her voice sounded strange, different than I'd ever heard it before. I hope I didn't shudder. I didn't want to upset her. Please, Annie, I'm very worried about you. That's not my name. She likes to change her name sometimes. It worries me. One day she's Beth, the next day Irene. It's just like her hair. She changes it every time. She runs away. I get so scared that one day I won't be able to find her, and the police won't be able to help because I won. Know what she looks like, or what she's calling herself. Sweetheart, I'd really like you to eat a little bit, just a little, please, for Mommy. And then she said, with the meanest look on her face, you're not my mommy. It hurt so much, it felt like a stab to my heart. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them, so I turned away. I heard her scramble onto the bed, her fingernails scratching like little claws on the posts. When I looked back, she had her back pressed against the corner of the room, legs drawn up to her chest, rocking back and forth, staring at me with those wild Lonnie eyes. I love you, Annie, I said with as much dignity as I could manage. But sometimes I just don't know how to deal with your behavior. She screamed, just this one long, loud, echoing screech, like a siren. Her mouth was wide open, but her face was blank. I covered my ears, got out of the room, and closed the door behind me. I had to collect myself before I could go Bill. He's been so odd lately. I don't want to worry him any more. I got a second plate of the macaroni and brought it to the bedroom. That's where he spent all his time, lying in bed. Honey, I made dinner. He didn't answer, didn't even roll over to look. I picked up the plate from this morning, the food on it untouched, and put the new one down where he could reach it. Annie's back. I found her in the park. She's pitching a fit in her room. Already, he must have heard the screaming. I always tried to keep her quiet, told her that Daddy needed rest, but she never listened. Sometimes I wondered if he could even hear her. He never got up to see what was wrong. I knelt beside the bed and looked into his eyes. He stared back at me, not saying a word. He'd been like ever since the first time Annie ran away. They'd been alone together. Then she had run off, and he'd stopped talking. He lay down in bed and never got up again, lost his job, lost so much weight, he hardly even looked like the man I married. I kissed him on the forehead and left. As I closed the door behind me, I thought I saw him start to get up, but I guess I must have imagined it. And he kept on with that awful screaming for hours. I stayed in the living room, sitting on our big 3-person couch alone. I turned up the TV as loud as I could, played music, turned on the blender, tried everything I could to drown out the awful screaming. It was like nails being driven into my ears, like spiders crawling up my neck, like ice water splashing on my legs. Finally it stopped. I thought maybe she'd finally tuckered herself out, but then the scratching started. That was almost worse. It started out quick, rhythmic, but it got slower as time went on. Sometimes Annie would make a noise like she was crying again. I started to worrying that she might be hurting herself. But I couldn't get that awful thing she had said to me or that wild look in her eyes out of my head. I just stayed in the living room and tried to sleep. I don't know how it got to be like this. I've thought about taking her to a doctor, but they always give her these strange looks. It's gotten to where I don't dare to go to the same doctor twice. I'm afraid they might be thinking of taking her away from me, of doing something awful to her. I've thought about calling in a priest. I know that must sound crazy, but the way she gets sometimes, like she doesn't even know me, it scares me so much. She call out to people who aren't there, shout names I do, and know like they're real people. And there was that business with the kitchen knife. It wasn't the first time she's tried to hurt me. She smuggles rocks into the house and tries to hit me with them when my back is turned. When she gets really wild, she bite and claw at me. Some days I start to wonder if she's really my little girl or something else, wearing her face, haunting me. After a long time, the scratching stopped and everything got quiet. I sighed with relief. The house is so much nicer when it's quiet. I looked at the clock and could hardly believe how late it was. She used to have finally fallen asleep. When I looked over at her door, I saw the light still on through the cracks. Quiet as I could, I tiptoed over. I would just peek in, turn off the light, maybe give her a little kiss good night. I opened the door just a crack, but that was all it took. She slammed through, knocked me to the floor, and scrambled away. Annie, stop, I shouted. She was going. She right to our bedroom, making so much noise I was sure it would wake. Still up, ... She shoved through our door and I ran after. But inside she was just standing there, staring at the bed. Sweetheart, Daddy's sleeping, I hissed. She started screaming again, even louder than before. She pointed at both and screamed and screamed. I shushed her, tried to tell her he was sleeping, but she wouldn't stop. She screamed and screamed. The sound pierced through me, tore apart every nerve in my body. I covered my ears and scratched at my face, and soon I was screaming too, just as loud as she was. I took her up in my arms and we screamed together. I hugged her as tight as I could, squeezed her to me, wishing I could do something, anything to make it stop. I held her so close I could feel her heartbeat, how soft and quiet it was, growing quieter and quieter. She stopped screaming, there in my arms, and soon I stopped too. I sank to my knees, holding my little girl in my arms, stroking her hair. I don't know how long we stayed like that. It was so dark in the bedroom. I looked down at Annie, but it wasn't Annie at all. I was holding one of my dolls. I must have fallen asleep, holding her there, and she snuck away and put a doll in my arms instead. It was a funny doll, one I didn't remember having. It had such lovely blonde hair. I felt so silly, holding that doll like that for who knows how long. I got up and carried it to the closet where I keep the other dolls and laid it there. There were so many dolls, and they were all so big. I was starting to run out of room, but I couldn't throw them out. They were so pretty, such lovely little dolls. They all looked different, but every single one reminded me of Annie. I checked around the house, but she was gone. She must have been very upset to run away twice in just 2 days. I got my coat on and got ready to go look for her again. Before I left, I went back to the bedroom to check on Bill. Somehow all the noise hadn't bothered him at all. I touched his forehead, but he didn't seem any different. My fingers stuck a little bit, and there was some funny green stuff left on them. Afterward, I wiped it off on the bed and said goodbye. It was such a lovely day outside. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. I love our house, but every once in a while I notice the worst SML in there, somewhere off in the distance. I heard the sound of children laughing. It was so nice to hear after all that awful noise last night. Maybe Annie thought so too. I followed the laughter. Story 7. Someone is killing my Tinder matches. My best friend, Kyle, was the first one to bring up the idea to me. A dating app. I had never really thought about trying something like that before. I guess I always liked the idea of meeting a girl out in the real world, having an old-fashioned love story to tell one day. Regardless, he ended up roping me in, convincing me that my idea of love only happened in the movies. He was probably right. This would be a refreshing change of pace for my inner romantic. After downloading the app and getting things set up, I started looking through the feed of profiles. I came across a girl just a year younger than me with deep blue eyes and a head full of beautiful blonde hair. Her name was Rachel. Interested, I tapped the bottom of the photo to read her bio. Looking for a true gentleman, someone fun who can cheer me up when I'm sad. Swipe right if you're my guy. I didn't hesitate to swipe her profile as requested. Afterwards, I continued scrolling to see if anyone else piqued my interest. Sure enough, someone did. A girl named Veronica. She was a brunette with green eyes, and her bio revealed that she was a movie lover. I swiped right on her profile as well. While scrolling through profiles, I got a call from my mom. She asked me to run to the store to pick up some stuff for dinner. I agreed and headed off to the local supermarket. After getting everything my mom needed for dinner, paying and loading up the bags into the car, I felt my phone buzz. I unlocked it to see a notification from Tinder. I had gotten a match, and it was with Rachel. She had sent a message asking if I wanted to meet her for coffee. I agreed to, and we decided on a little cafe on the edge of town for 5 o'clock the following evening. I was ecstatic, a girl that found me interesting. Along with my excitement, I felt quite nervous. I hadn't gone out with many girls that I hadn't already known for a while. I hoped things would go well, and that I wouldn't mess it up by being too weird or saying something really awkward. In any case, I rushed home, excited to tell them. Why, Mom, the good news. The next day I spent nearly 2 hours getting ready for my date with Rachel. After showering and cleaning up my face of stray hairs, I put on a clean black shirt and my favorite pair of dark blue jeans. I ran out to the dining room to give my mother a quick hug, grabbed the car keys, and rushed out the door. As I drove to the cafe, I decided to play some upbeat music off my phone, bobbing my head to the beat of the drums. As I drove along, I went over how I hoped the date would go. As I pulled onto the street the cafe sat on, I noticed a news van parked at the end of the street. Around the corner, I was met with a roadblock for police cruisers and an ambulance next to an overturned car. There was a telephone pole knocked over, broken in half, and laying on another one of the buildings. The car must have been going pretty fast to have knocked that thing over, I thought. An officer approached my car. I rolled down the window to ask about what had happened. He ignored my question and informed me the whole road was going to be shut down until they could clean up the wreckage. After he walked away, I turned around and parked around the corner to message Rachel, telling her we would need to reschedule due to the accident. After waiting a few minutes for a response and not getting one, I decided to head home for the night. I helped my mom cook dinner. Then her and I moved into the living room to watch some TV. While we ate, she turned on the television and flipped through the channels a bit. Before landing on the news channel, the news anchor was talking about the horrible crash on the edge of town. They said the driver had been incredibly intoxicated and was going nearly 80 miles an hour down the road before losing control and flying straight into a telephone pole. They showed a picture of the driver. As her name appeared on the screen, I felt my heart sink, nearly losing my breath. It was Rachel. I was in shock. When I finally got the nerve to react, I did so by jumping up from the couch and running up to my room, locking the door behind me. It may sound a bit weird having never met her in person, but I wept. Eventually, I got over Rachel's death. For a while, I convinced myself to stay away from dating. I convinced myself that I was somehow to blame for what happened. After all, if she hadn't had a date with me, she wouldn't have been driving in that direction. Once I worked out my mental woes, I gave that damn app another shot. One day, scrolling through the profiles, I came across one that I remembered seeing before. It was Veronica. Once again, I swiped right. Shortly after, we matched. Chatting ensued, followed by date plans at the movie theater just one town over. We were to meet at 9 p.m. that night. I arrived fashionably early, but Veronica was already waiting for me just outside the front doors. She wore a black dress with white, lacy flowers on it. She looked absolutely stunning. After exchanging pleasantries and chit-chatting for a moment, we went inside to grab tickets to the movie. The film Washington is great, and watching it with Veronica was even greater. We shared a popcorn and drink, and she wound up nuzzling her way under my arm a few minutes in, resting her head on my shoulder. At Washington as a picture-perfect date. After the movie got out, Veronica expressed interest in continuing our date. She said she wanted to go to the bowling alley near where I lived. We agreed to take my car and leave hers at the movie theater. As I drove, she asked me questions about myself, favorite movie, favorite song, etc. The typical things you ask when you're getting to know someone. It was nice. 10 minutes into our little road trip, Veronica pointed out what she thought was an animal standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down to a stop. We quickly realized that at Washington, as a person looking down, wearing some sort of mask, a little spooked, I attempted to turn the car around. As I did, a van backed out of the woods and onto the road, impeding my escape. I led forward, back towards the masked person, still standing in the road. I had no choice but to drive past him. When I did, I heard a loud pop, and the car began to shake. I unwillingly stopped right in front of the masked stranger. To my dismay, he approached the car, tapped on my window, and gestured that I roll it down. I just shook my head. Veronica screamed, noticing 2 more masked individuals emerge from the van and walk our way. I decided it best to crack the window just a bit. "What do you want?" I half shouted in the stranger's face. He lifted up the mask just past his mouth. "Your tire popped. We can fix that for you, if you want." I stared at the stranger for a moment, then over to Veronica. Tears were running down her face. She just shrugged at me. I turned back to the stranger and agreed. He lifted his head and nodded in approval. As he pulled the mask back down over his mouth, Veronica's window was smashed in by one of the other masked strangers. She shrieked. 2 sets of hands reached in and began pulling her out of the car. I reached for her, grabbing her hands, desperately trying to pull her back in. My window was the next to shatter, followed by more hands, this time coming from me. My face was slammed onto the pavement. I put my hand to my head and attempted to stand up with 1 foot firmly on the ground. I realized Veronica was no longer screaming. I turned to look to her side of the car, but my line of sight was interrupted by a baseball bat to the face. I blacked out. When I came to, my hands were tied behind my back around a pole. I looked around for Veronica, but she was nowhere in sight. I tried to look for some indication as to where I was, but there was nothing. No windows, no tables, not anything, just an empty room, the pole I was bound to, and a door that was presumably my only way out. I shouted for help, knowing it was more than likely a Washington saint of energy. I was right. Nobody came to my call. I tried to fidget my way out of my bonds, but was unsuccessful in my efforts. After an hour of squirming, the door swung open, slamming hard against the wall, and came Veronica, her mouth stuffed with a cloth, and one of our masked assailants guiding her into the room. He pushed her onto the floor before me. "Get on your fucking knees, bitch. Face your boyfriend," the man shouted. Veronica, tears rushing down her face, slowly did as the man said. He walked over, standing behind her. He then looked at me. "You think you can just do what you want, huh, Justin? You think you can just escape this place?" His voice sounded familiar, but too muffled by the mask to be sure. He pulled a gun from a holster, hidden under his long black shirt, and pointed it at Veronica. No, I screamed, but it didn't matter. The man pulled the trigger, and a bullet tore through the back of Veronica's head. She fell forward onto the floor, dead. I screamed hysterically. The man walked around her body and over to me. Standing directly in front of me, he pulled off his mask, revealing himself to be Kyle, my best friend. I was taken back, confused and horrified. My best friend had just shot a girl I cared about. After a moment of petrified shock, I spat at him. "What the fuck is this, Kyle? What the fuck is going on?" He smiled at me, then threw a heavy backhand across my face. After recovering from the hard smack, he grabbed me by the hair and leaned in close. "I fucking loved you, Justin, and you never fucking noticed. You came to me, bitching and complaining. Oh, I can't find a girlfriend. I want a girl from out of town. Fuck you, Justin," he slammed my head back against the pole. He walked over to Veronica's body, grabbed the cloth from her mouth, came back over, and shoved it into mine. At first I figured, okay, maybe he doesn't like me, but he shouldn't have to be alone, so I recommended you use Tinder. But I never thought you would match with anyone but me. You were mine. But when you found that bitch Rachel, I knew deep inside I couldn't allow you to be happy. I knew you had to be mine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I devised a plan. If I tore away to you mentally, maybe you'd seek out why comfort. But then you matched with this bitch, Veronica, and I knew I had to do something worse. I had to make you realize how dangerous the world can be, and that I'm the only one who can protect you. He arrested my face. I shook uncontrollably, closing my eyes as he did. "But I've come to realize you don't deserve me anymore, and you certainly don't deserve my care and protection." He backed up, raising the gun up to his head. I watched as a few tears rolled down his cheeks. "Nah, Justin, you're on your own." Written by R.L. Rogers. Click here to join R.L. Rogers' official subreddit.